إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Inshallah, the intention today is to get through three main topics. The first is about the Imam. The second is about making up missed prayers. And the third is a related topic, which is what to do with the Sunnah prayer when the Iqamah goes for the Fard prayer, which is a common occurrence on what should a person do in that situation. So it's something to be aware of. So, the Jama'ah is something that is a Sunnah Mu'akkada. And Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal said that it is a obligation that a person should pray in Jama'ah. So according to him, a person is sinful if he does not pray in Jama'ah. We mentioned in other previous classes that when we were discussing the adhan, that the Hanafis say that it is superior for a person to be the Imam rather than the Mu'adhin, and Imam Shafi'i says that the Mu'adhin is superior to the Imam, based on the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Fussilat, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا. So the person who calls to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is superior based on this ayah. The conditions of the Imam is that the Imam should be a Muslim. This is obvious. It's obvious but problematic. Why is it problematic? The reason it's problematic is the question then becomes, is the Imam that I am praying behind, is he actually Muslim or not a Muslim? And by that I mean, there are people who start to believe in things outside of Islam, and for all intents and purposes from the outside they look like they are Muslim, and their practice is Muslim, and they are leading the Muslims, but when you come and talk to them, their aqidah is batil, and when the aqidah becomes batil, then the prayer behind them becomes batil as well. The Imam who does bid'ah is different to the person who has aqidah that is batil. So the Imam that does a bid'ah, he remains a Muslim, and the prayer behind him, although undesirable, remains valid, as opposed to someone whose aqidah has left Islam. Okay? And so it is the responsibility of the people who select the Imam, whether that is the Sultan, which we don't have, or the Idara, or the people who run the affairs of the masjid or the locality. It is their responsibility that they choose an Imam whose aqidah is acceptable and valid, and also that he does not go into any kind of bid'at, right? And as far as possible stays away from the controversial areas where people do not agree on with regards to things. Of course, there's ikhtilaf in the fiqhi matters, and that's not an issue, that's not a consideration. The second condition, no one's taking notes, but the first condition was Islam. The second condition is maturity, that the Imam is baligh. Okay? This is agreed upon, except that Imam Shafi'i says that the Imam can be someone who has not reached bulugha. So a boy can lead the prayer, and the prayer behind him will be accepted. Imam Abu Hanifa says that no, the Imam has to be baligh. The exception to the rule is where Taraweeh is being led by a boy who has not reached maturity, but he's leading the prayer because he has memorized the Quran and he is close to bulugha. So for example, 11, 12, 13 years old child, that from the appearance the child has grown up. It's not a small child and is close enough to bulugha, then the Taraweeh behind this child will be valid and accepted. And the reason for this is that in many places these children memorize the Quran when they are young, and to make their memorization more solid and to encourage their memorization, they are put forward to lead the Taraweeh prayer. And you will go to, in this masjid 2 or 3 years ago, we had a boy that was leading the Taraweeh, and from his appearance he had not reached bulugha, right? And so some people had this issue: is the prayer behind him valid or not? But even in the Hanafi madhab, the prayer behind him is valid, and the Shafis have no issue at all. Whether it is Taraweeh or whether it is a fard prayer, there's no issue. There was a boy at the time of the Prophet ﷺ who in a village outside of Medina led the prayer. And so the Shafis take the evidence that a boy can lead the prayer because this boy led the prayer in that time, during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. The other fuqaha point out that this was an exception to the rule, that in this whole village no one else was learned anything about the Quran except this boy. And this boy had learned something that when the Sahaba used to pass by the village or someone who knew the Quran, he would stop them and say, recite something so that I can memorize it. This was his himmah and his interest in the Quran, that he would grab hold of them, they would recite it, and he would memorize it. So his memory was superb. And so he had memorized some of the surahs, and because he knew something and everyone else knew nothing, he automatically became the imam. And we'll come on to why that's relevant. Being a male is a condition of being an imam. This is something that we have discussed before, that Imam al-Shafi allows the prayer of the woman that leads the woman in the prayer. Even Imam Abu Hanifa says that the female who leads the prayer, although this is makruh, her imama is valid for the people that are praying behind her. Though the prayer is makruh, it is disliked extremely, but her being an imam is valid. But otherwise, in general, it is a male who should lead the prayer. Lastly, the recitation from memory. And there are two things to remember here. That the person recites the minimum amount of the Quran that is required, and that needs to be from memory. And in addition, there are tasbihat, tashahud, all these things, and the imam should have that from memory rather than reading it from a paper or a book in front of him. We discussed previously already in previous classes what is the ruling with regards to someone who is praying and has a Quran in front of him. So what is the ruling? Just checking if you are awake. Khidr wants to say something. No, he's thinking. He's a good student. He doesn't answer the question.
Is it what madhab?
Yes, okay, good answer. That's always a good start. Hanafi is not allowed. Shafis are allowed. And the Hanafis, as an additional thing, is that it invalidates the prayer, right? Because the reading intentionally invalidates the prayer.
Sometimes you have the imam is reading it from memory.
Yes.
But someone is behind him.
Yes, so for that, we mentioned already that for the Shafi'i imam, it is acceptable for him to take the luqma. The luqma is the person, he has made a mistake or he's forgotten the next word, the person behind him tells him that, it is acceptable for him. For the Hanafi imam, it's not acceptable for him to take the luqma from someone who is reading the Quran. And it is not acceptable for him to take the luqma from someone outside of the prayer. Okay? So there's a jama'ah going on, someone is sitting, resting against a pillar, and the imam makes a mistake and he shouts out what the correct answer is. That is not valid to take that. Okay. Trying to forget, or trying to decide my own handwriting. I've said about the maleness being free of salasal bawl. So if a person has salasal bawl, which we discussed as a whole session, that someone has chronic incontinence or some situation which means that his tahara is impacted chronically, right? We said that the coming out of pus breaks the wudu. So someone has a wound that is chronically producing pus, right? What does he do? How does he do wudu? How does he pray?
For every salah.
For every salah, he makes a new wudu. He cannot lead a prayer. The only situation that he can lead a prayer is that if everyone behind him is the same situation as he is. Okay? However, Imam Shafi allows it. Right. But is not recommended. Even though he allows it, he does not recommend it. The Imam needs to be free of impurity. So we said before that the Shafis are very strict, right? He cannot have any impurity on the clothes. They don't allow anything except for something very tiny, very insignificant. And Abu Hanifa says that if there is some impurity there that is considered small, the prayer will still be valid. However, the Imam himself should be free of impurity. So he needs a higher degree of carefulness, if you want to use that word. The Imam should be clothed. So if you remember, we will say that the person praying alone, if he has no clothes at all, his prayer is valid. But for the Imam, he has to be clothed. Unless it is a naked person leading a people that are all also naked. Let's say, now this situation you think is unusual, right? Guantanamo Bay, did they give them clothes? Right? What did the Americans do in the Iraqi prisons? Did they give them clothes? So there's situations where there are people like that. However, the jama'ah of unclothed people is undesirable, right? Because then they would be looking at each other's awrah doing the prayer. May Allah protect us from this kind of situation. Okay, the final condition of the Imam, I think I've said that twice, but I'm sorry. This is the final one. Is that the Imam should be free of any speech defects. There are 3 kinds of speech defects. Stuttering, okay? So someone says like this. Mumbling and lisping. And the lisping particularly affects the sin and the sheen and the dhal and the ra, right? So for example, someone is reading the ra like the ghain, or he turns the ra into the lam, okay? He turns the sin into a sheen. Those kinds of things, the prayer behind him is not valid. And it's unfortunate, I prayed in a masjid and the full-time Imam there had a good going lisp. And the people were, those of knowledge who were praying behind him were significantly concerned. And so when the Tablighi Jama'ah used to come, they would used to say, what is going on? What is going on here? And so they would not be praying in that masjid. So this person cannot lead the prayer, except, what is the exception? If everyone behind him has the same problem, right? So the general rule is the Imam cannot be inferior in these physical aspects to those who are behind him. Who is most entitled to be the Imam? Number 1, the general rule with all things is that the Sultan or the Qadi or the owner has the most right. We don't have a Sultan, we don't have a Qadi. So you make a mental note of these things just to learn fiqh, but practically speaking, these things are not applied. After that, it is the appointed Imam. If all of these are not present, now, how will an owner not be present? This applies when you are doing a jama'ah in a house. Okay? If you're doing a jama'ah in a house, then it is the owner of the house that has the most right. his guest may be a mufti of the country, the highest authority in the land, but the owner of the house has the most right to lead the prayer. However, he can give permission to someone else to lead the prayer. So people invite me here and there, and the prayer, the time enters, and I wait for them to give me the permission. Otherwise, who has the haqq? It is the host who has the haqq of leading the prayer. If all of these are not present, then you have to follow a set of rules to designate who will be the imam. So I'm the appointed imam in this masjid for the regular prayers. If I am not present, then who will the imam be appointed? The people have to designate. And in general, when you look at these rules, what you will realize is that people have to know each other. If you don't know each other, there is no way that you can decide who's going to be the imam. The first quality that is agreed upon by all the fuqaha, no disagreement at all, that the person who is most learned about the rules of prayer will lead the prayer. And this makes sense, right? Because the imam, when he makes a mistake, he needs to know, has the prayer become invalidated? Or does it require sajda saw? Or is this a mistake that doesn't require anything at all? Okay? If he does not know those minimum rules, then he will not be able to do a complete prayer. He needs to know the fara'id, the wajibat, the sunan, those kinds of things. He needs to know all of the sunan and the adhkar of the prayer. He needs to know the recitation that will be done in the prayer. This person does not necessarily have to be the person that has a beautiful voice. As we will see, a beautiful voice comes in, I think, under number 8. And what happens generally when you go to masajid is people pick the person who has the best voice, no matter he's come wearing a torn jeans, right? He's not even covering his awra, but here you go, lead the prayer. Or he's wearing dirty clothes, there you go, lead the prayer. Just because you have it has got nothing to do with imamah. Imamah is regards to the heart and the knowledge. Then, if the people present are equivalent, or there's a number of people that are equivalent in category 1, you go down to category 2. Okay? And category 2 is ثُمَّ الْأَقْرَأ, meaning the person who is most learned about recitation. Now understand this carefully. There is something called tajweed rules, and there is something called ilm al-qira'ah, which is understanding how to recite the Quran. Okay? I'll give you an example. قالوا نعبد إلهك وإله آبائك إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق إلها واحدا. Okay, I recited this without stopping. Now I'll recite it another way that will be completely invalid. In fact, this is equivalent to kufr if I did it intentionally, knowingly. قالوا نعبد إلهك وإله آبائك إبراهيم وإسماعيل. And I stop. وإسحاق إلها واحدا. What did I do?
Two sentences.
And I made it 2 sentences, but what does the meaning mean now?
وإسحاق إله واحد.
Ishaq is ilah wahid, na'udhu billahi min dhalik, right? So can you see how ilm al-qira'ah, even if I did not do correct tajweed, is highly critical, right? So the person leading the prayer needs to understand what he is reading, how he is reading. And the stopping rules is very important. Okay? Included in this, not just the stopping rules, is something called the starting rules. Where do you start a recitation from? Okay? And there's many examples like this in the Quran. You don't start from a passage that is connected to the one before to a very high degree, where if you start from that place, it will not make any sense at all, right? أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْبُدُونَ is an end of an ayah, and the next ayah is مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. So to start a rak'ah with مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ makes no logical sense at all, even though it is a beginning of an ayah. All right? So this I'm teaching you just for your knowledge to understand what I mean by ثُمَّ الْأَقْرَأ. But within this ثُمَّ الْأَقْرَأ is knowing the rules of tajweed. We said that the Imam must know the correct pronunciation of the letters. That's a condition. So if he's pronouncing the sin as a sheen, his prayer is, behind him, is invalid. If he prays by himself, he is valid. It is obligatory for him to learn how to recite the Quran correctly. It's not a sunnah, it is obligatory, because he has to pray, right? The Imam should know the rules of tajweed and practice that. If the people present are equivalent in these two factors, it goes to the next. After this, the fuqaha disagree on which order. I'm going to go through the Hanafi order, just for you to get a sense. The others are similar. There are slight differences in number 3, 4, 5, which order they are. ثُمَّ الْأَرْوَعَ. There is taqwa, and this is wara'. Okay? Taqwa is where a person stays away from sins. Wara' is where someone stays away from something where there is doubt. Okay? There is halal and there is haram. Give an example. There's halal and there's haram. And there is something that is mashbuh. Some people will say it is halal until proven otherwise, so they eat it. And some people will say, I'll say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, everything becomes halal with my saying of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and they will eat it. And the Imam should have wara'. He should be very careful. Okay? This kind of person who is careful in his activities, in what he eats and how he talks to people, in his business dealings, because he is honest in all those things, he will be honest in leading the prayer. Let's say the Imam has broken his wudu during the prayer. Right? What should he do?
Move away.
He has to move away. What else does he have to do? Appoint someone, right? Now this Imam who does not have taqwa, what does he do? He says people will think I'm this and all that, and then he will continue, right? So you select an Imam that has taqwa. Now how do you decide someone has taqwa? From your observations of him, right? From your dealings with him, right? If you find that this person is prepared to break the rules, to do this, that, or the other, he is prepared to lie or to cheat, this is not a person that is, suitable for the position. You have a question?
Yeah. You said he has to appoint someone?
Yes.
Well,
so
move
if he's...
Move away, how would he appoint someone?
I say, Muhammad, you lead the prayer.
Well, he can talk.
He's
Because I've seen it, the reason I ask, I've seen it, they move away and then someone just jumps
Yes.
in.
That, so
But
if the
anyone,
if the Imam leaves the prayer, does not appoint someone and goes, then the people who are behind him may appoint something without talking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And so this is why I keep saying one of the problems in this masjid is that there's no hafiz behind me. There should be a hafiz, but all the hufaz run away from the imama, so they make sure they're at the corner. And personally go and complain to them, but it's made no difference. So it can happen to anyone, right? Without control, your wudu breaks, and there should be someone. Now, I've already taught you that if an illiterate person goes to lead the prayer, everyone's prayer becomes invalid, right? So if someone behind me has no idea how to pray, he becomes the imam, everyone's prayer becomes invalid. So it is better that he does ishara, or he asks someone to lead the prayer. I don't know if I told you guys this story. I was leading the prayer. I said Allahu Akbar. I started to read the Fatiha, and then I remembered that I don't have my wudu. So I left the prayer. It was one of my close friends. He was also a hafiz. I told him to lead the prayer. I went to go and make wudu. As I was making wudu, he also joined me to make wudu. So, it happens. I'm just going to run through the rest, okay? Number 4 is the oldest. This is generally because the oldest has more knowledge and has experience and wisdom. Number 5 is the person with the best akhlaq. Number 6, now we are starting to get to some weirder things. But this is what the fuqaha have written to try and, if they go to number 5 and you can't find anyone who is better, the person with the handsome face. I think that would be problematic, right? Like, how do you decide who's handsome and who's not? Number 7 is the person with the noble lineage. Again, I think that's difficult to separate. Number 8 now is the person with the beautiful voice. Okay, so you can see it has no importance in selecting an imam at all. And one of the teachers I was listening to, he was saying that someone came to him and said that so and so, we don't enjoy praying behind him. And he rebuked him and he said, don't ever come and complain to me ever again. The person that you are praying behind me, his knowledge is so vast that if you spend a whole lifetime studying, you will not even get anywhere close to him. So the mufti, frequently they haven't had time to work on their voice or whatever else, They don't necessarily have a good voice, but they are the most appropriate person to be leading the prayer, and the beautiful voice has nothing to do with imama at all. Number 9 is the person with the cleanest clothes. So he already has tahara, there is no najasa, but the person with the cleanest clothes. So that's where they end, okay? And then they say, if you are unable to find the best person despite these 9 rules, then you draw lots, okay? So you can draw lots in any way. You take straws, whoever gets the short straw, they lead the prayer or something like that, right? Now, understand also that when they talk about these things, that in general, the person who has imam should be meeting most of these criteria, if not all of them, right? So he should have good akhlaq, he should be learned, he should be a person who knows the recitation, he should be a careful person, etc., etc. Any questions so far? Yes.
Most of these characteristics is a hidden one. For example, whether he is wara, whether he has a taqwa.
Yes.
And people who know each other from the childhood, maybe they know each other who is good for
sure.
us. But when we can like this,
it's hard in metropolitan centers. Yeah. What's the solution? That's why I'm saying that when you listen to these rules, what you'll realize is that you need to know each other, right? So for example, how much do you memorize? Do I know the answer to that? I don't know the answer to that. Okay. Do you know the recitation rules? I don't know that, right? So generally, one of my habits is that when I meet someone who looks like he's Ahlul Quran, the first question I ask him, what's your name? Second question I ask him is, how much do you memorize? And you can, one of these interesting things that people who are of the Quran, you can see it in their face, right? And so this student who just walked away is from Ahlul Quran. Okay, you can ask him how much he has memorized. So people who have spent time learning the deen, you can see it in their behavior, in their clothing, in their actions. You can ask them. So people who are regular to the masjid, they should know each other. They should try to know each other by talking, introducing, spending time with each other. One of the problems we have, like when you live in villages, everyone knows each other anyway. When you live in towns, people know each other generally. But when you live in cities, no one knows. I don't know all your names, right? And this is a problem. Right? Why don't we know each other, right? And so this is something that we need to try and resolve as a community.
One more question. For example, certain people can't pronounce a letter. For example, ha, ha.
Yeah.
They say ha.
Yeah.
They oh.
Yeah.
So, and when they're reading as an imam,
yeah,
you see they cannot even pronounce the letter correctly.
Yeah. So this person should avoid being the imam and avoid being selected as the imam. And this is common from where I come from, that they cannot say ha and ayn correctly, or even the hamza correctly. But if the person is being the imam, they need to learn that. So one of my acquaintances was telling me a story. They said that when I tried to learn the Quran in childhood, I didn't spend a lot of time, so I didn't learn. So when I became an adult, I wanted to learn, so I went to someone saying, I went to memorize some surahs. He said, okay, recite. And then he put me in the Qaida, the children's book. And he said he kept me on that in 6 months, and I got tired and I left it. And the problem is the ha and the hamza, right? They're not fixing it, so they can't progress until they fix it. It's a common problem. So, yes.
So it makes no difference if you have an accent or something, okay?
An accent to a degree is acceptable. So, for example, the Turkish people, right? They can't say, or they can say, but they're commonly, they don't say "oo" correctly, right? They say "oh," right?
Because the language.
Because that's how they speak in Turkish, right?
Yeah.
They have a few different ways of saying "oh." In English we say "oh," right? And in Arabic it's not "oh," it's "oo." "Oo." And you have to bring the tongue forward, and until you do that, you will not get the correct Dhamma sound. All other "oo" sounds are incorrect, right? And same thing with "a." Some people have fixed "a," right? They can't say "a." "E." So instead of saying "rihla," you'll say "rihla," right? So there's no kasra is not done correctly, and all these kinds of examples. I don't want to go into a tajweed class. Yes, sure.
With the, with the tongue,
The stuttering. Yeah.
You don't pray behind?
Yeah. So the prayer of this person is not valid. The imam of this person is not valid. If he prayed by himself, it is valid, right? But he should not be.
He's a full-time imam.
Yeah. Don't pray behind him. Right? Because the fuqaha say that this person is not meeting the conditions of imam. Now it has to be something that's obvious, right? So someone is, he forgot what's the next word. That's not a stuttering. He's just hesitating rather than stuttering.
Some of them, when they talk, they stutter.
Yes.
And when they recite.
When they recite, that's fine. The issue is the recitation. Can they do the recitation without
in
those?
In the sujood, when they go, like when they say Sami Allahu liman hamida or Allahu Akbar.
Yeah, don't pray behind them. Yeah. I would not pray behind them.
Huh?
Allah is not Allah.
Yeah. So when you're changing that, you're changing the word. That's the problem. Yeah. Like, so now you know, right? Like in the past, what has happened, the past is different. So now you know, then you first should not pray.
Because I think he had a stroke or something like that.
The prayer behind it, that if the person has had a stroke like that and is praying like that, the prayer behind it is not valid, according to the fuqaha. Right? And I did not find a difference of opinion in this.
This is agreed upon all that?
Yeah, I did not find any difference of opinion on this. Yeah. As I keep saying to you, I don't check the Salafis' opinion. So if they have an opinion about it, I don't know. If someone comes with that, then that's fine. I'm not aware. The Jama'ah is excused for a number of reasons, and I can't remember if I've done this or not, but these include things like heavy rain, severe cold, widespread mud. That doesn't apply to us. If someone is sick, if you are fearing a ruler will imprison you, blindness, if you are in jail, if you are frail, you can't walk, if you are about to travel, or you're looking after a sick person. This is not the exhaustive list. The fuqaha described 18 or 19 different causes. So if your excuse is within these things, and the person is forgiven for missing the Jama'ah. Okay? Someone lives in Canada and half the year is extremely cold, then he is forgiven for not attending the masjid in that period of time. If he does attend, it is preferable and he is rewarded more greatly. So when there's a thunderstorm and you decide to stay at the house, or you decide to come to the masjid, there is greater reward for coming during that thunderstorm than not. Obviously making sure that you're not going to die on the way because of the thunderstorm. Okay. The next topic I'd like to cover is the making up of prayers. I know I've had a number of questions about this, so we'll cover some key principles. The Prophet ﷺ said that if a person slept or he forgot about the prayer, then he should make it up. Okay? Based on this principle, all the fuqaha have agreed that if a person slept or he forgot, or he did not pray intentionally, he has to make up all those prayers. This is agreed upon by all the fuqaha. The one faqih that did not agree with this is Imam Ibn Taymiyyah. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah said that if a person forgets or he sleeps, he needs to make up the prayer. But if he did not pray intentionally, he does not need to make up the prayer. That's his opinion that other people do not agree with. And so, if a person, did not practice Islam for a number of years, and then he did tawbah, and then he started to pray, he needs to do an accounting of how many prayers he has missed. And how will he do this? He will go back to when he became a baligh, when he became a child, right? And from there he will count the number of years or months or days until he started praying regularly. And what he will now start to do is to make up those prayers. Okay? It is preferred if a person can specify which prayer he is making up. So let's say a person specifies, I am making up the prayer of Monday, Dhuhr, from the year so and so, from the month so and so, right? However, it is not compulsory. If he does not do it, that's fine. But if he has, let's say, 5 years worth of prayers to make up, right? He will continue making that up until he has finished that. So it requires, number one, accounting of what you have missed. And the second thing is keeping a record of how you have missed this. The ulama give a practical way to do this, and that practical way is that every time you come to pray dhuhr, you make up one dhuhr from the years past. Every time you prayed asr, you made asr from the years past, right? So he is praying 5 times a day, and he is making up for 1 day of 5 prayers that he has missed. In this matter, he will finish completing the 5 years worth of prayers that he has missed. So this is the ruling with regards to a large number of prayers. The common situation is a person does not have a good idea of how many prayers he has missed. And what the fuqaha say in this matter is that he should give his best estimate of how much he has prayed. When he has done that best estimate, then he completes that amount. Okay? So the common thing that happens, 2 common things. One, as a person hits puberty, he is careless with the prayers because his parents have not got him in the habit, and then he becomes in his mid-20s or even later than that, and he starts to become more regular. So now he doesn't quite have an idea of exactly which prayers he has missed. Because one day he prayed dhuhr that day, the rest of the day he didn't pray anything. The next day he prayed maghrib, he didn't pray anything else that day. 1 week he prayed Jum'ah, he didn't pray anything. 1 year he prayed Eid and nothing else. So there's things he's prayed, there's things he has missed. So he has to do the best estimates he can and then pray those prayers. Right? Any questions about that? Yes.
To make up the prayers?
Yes.
So is it like only the fard or fard,
Yes.
sunnah, and everything?
Yes. The Hanafis state that he should make all the fard prayers and the witr prayers only, not the sunnah. No one is saying that you make up the sunnah prayers. The other 3 fuqaha say that he makes up the 5 daily prayers. Right? So it's only the Hanafis that state that he should make the witr prayer as well. Why is that? Because our position is that the witr is wajib on the basis that the Prophet ﷺ never left the witr prayer even during travel. Yes.
So why Imam Taymiyyah has a different opinion? What's his basis?
It's a technical answer. And
In a common man language.
okay. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah's position of his madhab is that everything must have an evidence basis. Okay? The evidence basis of the 4 fuqaha is this hadith. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah states that in this hadith it says two things. If he forgets or he sleeps, he should make up the prayer. Right? He doesn't say if he left the prayer intentionally, he should make up the prayer. Do you understand his logic? The answer is very straightforward. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا. Do not say to your parents, uff. Okay? Does that mean you can punch them?
No.
Logically you cannot. But does Allah say that you cannot punch them? No. Right? So our position is that not everything has to come in the nas. The nas tells you other things that are not said. By the nas I mean the source text. The source text is, if you left a prayer, make it up. So the general principle is, it does not matter whether you left it intentionally or you left it unintentionally. Yes?
Two questions. How do you make up the Jummah prayer if you've missed it?
That's a very, very good question.
And second,
yes,
does this apply to reverts as well?
No, it does not apply to reverts. Imam Shafi has a position, and understand this position. And his position is not regards to the reverts. It's regards to a person who was a Muslim. He becomes a murtad, and then he becomes a Muslim again. The other three fuqaha say that when he was a murtad, he does not need to make up his prayers. Because he was not a Muslim, there was no prayer on him. Imam Shafi'i says, no, there was prayer on him even though he was a murtad. And so he has to make up that period of prayers as well. Okay? The revert is not accounted for anything that happened in the past. On the basis that the Prophet ﷺ did not make any of the Sahaba that became Muslims do the prayers that they had missed in the past. There's not a single case of that. Okay? The Jumu'ah prayer is a very interesting thing. I don't think I have seen a ruling with regards to that. And my estimate would be that he makes it up as a Dhuhr prayer, because if you miss the Jumu'ah, you don't pray 2 rak'ah, you pray 4 rak'ah. So that's probably the answer, but I didn't find it within this chapter.
That's the logic answer.
Yes. Yes.
What if you're at school and you don't intentionally to miss your prayer, but because you're at school, you miss the prayer for like 6 years?
Okay, number one, it's not a valid excuse. Okay, not a valid excuse.
But you can't do anything. It's like you have to be at school.
You can still make up.
All schools within Australia allow you to pray during lunchtime.
You think that you can't?
Okay, that's your own fault. It's your own fault rather than an excuse. I'm not saying to you anything personally. It's a general answer. Okay, and I have mentioned this multiple times, perhaps not here, but in other masajid, that when you are at work, when you are at school, whenever you are anywhere, it is not a valid excuse to leave the prayer. Okay? You have to pray the prayer on time. Let's say the person has not prayed, then he will pray immediately when he is able to. There are situations where a person is physically unable to pray, like the surgeon operating, like a soldier who is in the middle of combat, and those are valid excuses. However, there's all kinds of situations. He's fallen down a cliff and he's holding off. Can he pray like this? No. There's all kinds of valid excuses. But you're in school. What stops you from praying? Nothing at all. Okay? Alhamdulillah, I work as a doctor. It's busy work. Never missed a prayer, alhamdulillah. So it's not a valid excuse. So this is another thing to understand, is that the person makes up what he has missed. So for example, if he missed a prayer when he was traveling, then the prayer he makes up is the shortened prayer, because the prayer of the traveler is a shortened prayer.
And that another question.
Sure.
Is it special for the people that convert to Islam? Are they more special than the people that are Muslim that miss their prayers?
Interesting question. A person who was from the...
Have to pray, and then now they become Muslim, so then it's like... Oh.
Okay. All right. Okay, I understand your question now. The person who was not a Muslim before that becomes a Muslim, with him becoming a Muslim, everything before it is forgiven. That makes him special. Okay, he becomes better than us because he has no sins, right? Number two, it's a big deal. Okay, just understand that him becoming a Muslim is a big deal. It's not a small thing, because he's changed his ideology. That means he's actually changed himself as a person, even though he does nothing at all. He has turned around from all the sins he used to do. Let's say he used to do zina, let's say he used to do alcohol. Him just accepting there's an ilah, and there's only one ilah, it's accepting that everything before it is wrong, right? And when he accepts that everything before it is forgiven, so he turns around and he becomes a Muslim. So he's special in that category. Second thing is, there was no prayer on him, so he doesn't need to make it up. Whereas a person who's already a Muslim, as soon as he becomes a Muslim, those prayers are becoming fard on him. When he does not pray them, he becomes sinful. And he has to make them up because they were fard on him. Even the school, get that out of your mind. The school does not matter. Okay? And we've even talked about so many different eases, like, right? Of where you can pray and all those kinds of things. Allah has made those kinds of things easy. So there are people that are praying in more difficult situations than school, you know. You go to public schools in Sydney.
That was my problem.
There's people that do Jum'ah in public schools. They do Jama'ah in public schools. I went to a public school. I didn't go to a special private school. I went to a public school. The only Muslim in the school and the city, apart from my family. Right? So we used to pray. It's not an issue. Okay, before I go to you, okay, one thing I want to tell you is, as a Muslim living in a non-Muslim country, your attitude should be, I am on the haqq. Okay? Do not have an inferiority complex. If anything, you have a superiority complex. You should be humble because you are on the haqq. Everyone else, those non-Muslims, they are not on the haqq and they are misguided. If they make fun of you or they do anything with you, it's because they are not on the haqq. You are on the haqq. You being afraid of them is your iman's weakness. Do you understand that? So build your iman first so that those things are not an excuse. Yes.
The position of the four imam, exactly the same.
Correct.
In regards to missing the prayer.
Correct.
So you have to make it up.
Correct. Yeah. Okay.
If you do not pray, is a sin.
Correct.
So, can you make tawbat for a sin?
Yes.
Like, for example, I didn't pray it. That's sin. So I can tawbat
and then now you don't have to pray.
Then the sin has
The fuqaha say you have to do two things. Okay, and there's something I'm going to come on to. There's two things you have to do. One thing is you have to make up the prayer, and the second thing you have to do is tawbah as well. So making up the prayer by itself is not sufficient. The person has to do tawbah as well. I did not hear this, but my recommendation is that a person, every time he makes up a prayer, at the end of that prayer, he does tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that I missed a prayer, I have made this up, please forgive me. Every time he makes up a prayer. And it shows his ongoing remorse for what he has done in the past. Any more questions? Yes?
What should be the order? Like, for example, if you miss 5 prayers.
Okay, that was my next topic. Thank you for that question. If the person has missed a prayer of that day that he is in right now, so it is Asr time and he remembers, oh, I haven't prayed Dhuhr. I completely forgot. Okay? Or for example, he remembers that he prayed Dhuhr without wudu. Right? Before he prays Asr, he should pray Dhuhr. The order is necessary. Okay? The exception to this rule is Imam al-Shafi'i says that if the prayer that he is in right now is about to end, that he prays that prayer first, then he goes back to pray the prayer before it. Okay? And it is recommended that he repeats the prayer he has already prayed. So for example, This is Imam Shafi, not Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Shafi says that if at the end of Asr time he remembers he hasn't prayed Dhuhr and Asr, now Asr is about to end, he does not have time to pray both prayers. Okay, then he prays Asr and then he prays Dhuhr. Okay? However, the others state no, the order is necessary. He has to pray Dhuhr, then he prays Asr. I'll give you another example. This continues for 6 prayers. Some of the fuqaha have said 5, the Hanafi position is 6 prayers. So for example, at Isha time, I remember that I have not prayed Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr and Maghrib. I have been very naughty. Okay? I cannot pray Isha until I have prayed Fajr, then pray Dhuhr, then pray Asr, then pray Maghrib, and then I will pray Isha. The order is necessary because it is within 6 prayers. Did you understand this? Okay. Once it gets beyond 6 prayers, meaning it is many, the order is no longer necessary. Okay? So he may pray the make-up prayers in any order. The related subject is, does the person pray the sunnahs or not? And we said he does not. The related question to that is, can he pray them? Okay? Most of the fuqaha say that he should not. Imam Malik says that he should pray the sunnah of Fajr and the Shafa and the Witr. That's what Imam Malik says. Okay? Imam Abu Hanifa says that he can pray all the sunnah mu'akkadas and the sunnah ghair mu'akkadas related to all the prayers. He can do that. Okay, so for example, someone comes to pray Dhuhr time. He wants to pray the sunnah mu'akkada of that day. The fard of that day he has to pray. And he also wants to make up a fard of last year. So he can pray the sunnah mu'akkada of that day, as well as the Dhuhr from last year, as well as the Dhuhr of that day. The other fuqaha say no, he doesn't pray the sunnah mu'akkada of that day, because he's praying a 4 rak'ah voluntary prayer when a fard prayer is on his head. He should not pray the voluntary prayer at all. Did you understand these 2 opinions? Yes? Okay.
Then it's not allowed, it's difficult for him.
Imam Shafi says he needs to focus on his fara'id. He should not be praying his voluntary prayers. Okay? Because the general rule is if you have a fard left on you, you should not be engaging in voluntary things. You need to complete the fard. Right? It's a similar thing that someone starts to learn a voluntary knowledge and he has not completed the fard knowledge first. Yes.
So if I miss the Fajr prayer,
yes.
So do I have to make up at the time of Zuhr, or as soon as I wake up, that time I should make up?
Immediately when you wake up. Okay, without delay, without engaging in other activities, the person prays Fajr. Okay, and he needs to pray that Fajr prayer before the Dhuhr prayer enters. However, the Dhuhr prayer has entered, he still has to pray the Fajr prayer, then he prays the Dhuhr prayer. He cannot pray the Dhuhr prayer, then the Fajr prayer. Yes. So he had his hand raised and then I'll come to you. Yes.
Now, what's the hukm of tartib?
Tartib.
What's the hukm of it? Wajib or is it sunnah?
It is wajib. It is wajib. It is wajib within the 6 prayer times. Okay. If I am within the last 6 prayers, then the tartib is wajib. If I am beyond that, I have missed more than 6 prayers, the tartib is no longer required. Okay. So like for the Hanafis, it voids the prayer. Okay, I prayed Asr and I have not yet prayed Dhuhr, the Asr is void. Okay, and I have to go back and pray the Dhuhr, then I have to pray the Asr. Let's say I missed 3 prayers and I prayed Maghrib, then Asr, then Dhuhr, thinking that's how I have to do it. All 3 of them are void. Okay, you can say the Dhuhr is not void yet, right? The Maghrib and the Asr are void. To go back and make them up.
And the second one is does the time, prohibited time of the prayer,
that's the next topic.
Next topic.
I'll come to that before.
does it void the tartib? No.
I don't understand your question.
So you've got tartib. You come like after Asr, before Maghrib.
Yep.
You haven't prayed Asr.
Yep.
And it's in makruh. Just for example, you haven't prayed Dhuhr.
Yep.
The Asr is on its time.
I'll come to that. Yeah.
Sunday you get like once in a blue moon. You forgot the Dhuhr prayer and the Asr Jamaat standing.
Yeah.
And you start praying with the Imam.
Mm-hmm.
And then after second or third rakah you remember you haven't prayed Dhuhr.
Yeah.
So what do? You make salam, or you make intention with the prayer that are you praying, because you already made the intention for Asr.
Yes, that prayer for you is not valid. Okay? Regardless of whether you are praying alone or behind the Imam, it's not valid for you.
So what do you do? Make
So what you
salam?
do is you break the prayer.
You
Okay?
break the prayer?
You break the prayer and then you start the Dhuhr prayer for yourself. Okay? And the better way to do it is that a person breaks away from the Jama'ah, goes to the corner where nobody can see him, he prays the Dhuhr prayer, and then he joins the Imam again for the Asr prayer. Assuming the Jama'ah is still going.
By the time you remember, by the time you pray, you will miss the Asr.
That's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah. Because the tartib there is important. Yeah.
To make a quick question again about the pronunciation we talked about before. When we're praying, sometimes you say Qaidul Maghdubi Alayhim, and then there's him. What is that?
That's just a qira'ah. It's got nothing to do with the...
That's not what to do.
Yeah, that's not something of consideration. Yes.
Yeah, so for example, if I miss Dhuhr prayer,
Yeah.
okay, I know it's a sin, but for example,
You can't do alayhim.
I can't do alayhim.
You can't. No, you can't do
I
alayhim.
do alayhim.
You have to do alayhim. I can
so
do
what
it.
is the alayhim?
That's the riwayah of Khalaf on Hamza. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
And so another one said, "Can I start reciting?" And this is no, unless you have learnt it, you are not allowed to recite it.
Yeah, no.
Okay? Because the set of rules are together. You have to memorize the bunch of rules together. So unless you learn them and the teacher gives you permission, you're not allowed. Yes.
So, for example, if I miss Dhuhr prayer,
Yeah.
okay, and then I start praying first, okay, and I don't make up the Dhuhr prayer, okay, even knowing that. Okay,
Sorry, just start again. There's noise in the back. Sorry, start
I
again.
missed the Dhuhr prayer.
Yes.
And then there is a time for us. I
Yes.
started Asr.
Yes.
Knowing that, okay, I missed the Dhuhr prayer.
Sure.
I didn't make up, okay? And
Yeah.
I just completed my Asr prayer and
Yeah.
didn't make up for Dhuhr. So this Asr will be valid or?
Correct. It will be invalidated because you have not yet prayed Dhuhr prayer, right? The only exception I talked about was Imam Shafi, right? Imam Shafi says when the prayer time is ending, then you pray the Asr. It becomes valid because the time was about to end, right?
If you have some, if you already missed some prayers,
Yes.
maybe 10, 20,
Sure.
and you didn't pray last Dhuhr this day.
Today's Dhuhr, yes.
It will be added to the other. So the 13, this 13,
Okay.
the 13 for...
When you have missed that many, 10, 20, right? The tartib no longer matters. And the prayer of today is still fard on you, right? Okay? So Dhuhr time of today has entered. I have to pray today's Dhuhr prayer. And no longer the tartib is okay, right? Now you have two sets of problems. The old prayers, they don't need tartib. The prayer of today needs tartib. Okay? Now you have two sets of rules that apply to you. The Dhuhr of today is required before you pray the Isha. When you come to Isha, understand this rule, okay? It's a bit difficult to understand. You prayed Asr and Maghrib and you came to Isha and you remembered that you have not prayed Dhuhr. What should you do?
That's a qadha.
Okay, but what should you do now? Dhuhr, Asr and Maghrib are repeated. Okay? Dhuhr, Asr and Maghrib are repeated before you pray Isha. Because the tartib is required because you are within 6 prayer times.
24 hours.
The 24 hours is not counted. Okay? It is 6 prayer times. Yes.
There is one other confusion.
Sure.
So, for example, in this case, where we are making up for like 10 years or 12 years.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And I have estimated some number.
Sure.
So it's not the, by this rule, it's not the only the prayers which I have missed means all those prayers. For example, if I didn't make up, right? So means all those following prayers, they were also invalidated. So for example, if I
No. What is invalidated is the prayer of the day. Okay? Let's say I have a 1997 prayer to make up. Okay? As I'm making them up, they do not invalidate today's prayer.
No, not today's. On that day. So for example, I have estimated that most of the time I missed my Fajr prayer. Okay, I made a guess.
No. Once you are beyond 6 prayer times, okay, just remember the 6 prayer timelines. 1997, I missed Fajr. The only thing I have to make up is Fajr prayer. That day's Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha is now validated because it is beyond the 6 prayer times.
Okay.
Got it?
Got it.
Clear as mud? I've tried to explain it. You're confused?
We're always confused. Everything is confusing.
I'm trying very hard.
Nitty-gritty.
You know, what you have to do as a student, right? And I keep saying this, is you have to make notes, right? When you make notes, you diagram it out. Condition number 1, okay? If I'm a student, this is how I write it. Number 1, prayers have to be made up, regardless of how many. Okay? Number 2, who does not have to make up a prayer? The woman menstruating does not have to make a prayer. The person who is insane does not have to make up a prayer. We've done this already, I'm not repeating this. That's rule number 2. Rule number 3 is, okay, if there are many prayers, the tartib is not required. Rule number 4, you have to calculate what you pray. Rule number 5 is, if it is the prayer of the day, the tartib is compulsory. Okay? When the tartib is compulsory, if you did not follow the tartib, you have to repeat the tartib. It's very logical. I've simplified it. Does that make sense now? Are we clear? Yeah. Okay.
So that's a question.
Sure.
With the importance of praying on time,
Yes.
if for certain different prayers of the day, is there a window of time where, for example, Asr prayer, can you pray it just before the Maghrib? Or is everything supposed to be on time, all the time? Do you know
Simple
what I mean?
answer is, if you prayed Asr before the time of Maghrib entered, the prayer was prayed in its time. Right? You did not pray it in the preferred time. Right? That is the makruh time, to pray Asr just before Maghrib. That is the makruh time, because the sun is about to set, or it is starting to set. It's a makruh time, right? Even though it is the part of the prayer, people are starting to come in. That means that my time is about to end. So that's not a consideration. You've prayed within the time. You don't have to do any of that. Louder, my hearing is not that good, sorry.
If I don't pray Asr,
Yes.
then it's time for Maghrib.
Yes.
In Masjid,
Yes.
I go to the Masjid, I pray Asr.
You have to pray Asr before you join the Maghrib with the Jama'at. Got it? Okay? Now, last thing related to making up prayers is, when can the make-up prayers be done? Okay? And this is a consideration now. So we said the example of a person who has 10 years worth of prayers that he has not prayed, and he is making it up now. So, and I said the easy way to do it is that you pray Fajr of that day and you pray a Fajr of 12 years ago, right? So there is no prayer allowed between the Fard of Fajr and the rising of the sun, except Imam Shafi allows it, right? So can I pray a make-up prayer at this time? The answer is yes. Okay, the make-up prayers are allowed in those times. And generally the fuqaha have allowed the make-up prayers to be prayed at any times. Imam Abu Hanifa said there are 3 times where even a make-up prayer cannot be made up. Number 1 is when the sun is rising, actually rising. Number 2, when the sun is setting, so it's actually setting. And number 3 is the zawal time, the meridian time, that the prayer cannot be made up in those 3 times. So, for example, you have prayed Asr of that day, and you have an Asr to make up from 1997, then you may pray it even after the Fard of the Asr of that day. Is that clear? Even though there's usually no prayer allowed between the Fard of Asr and Maghrib. Not actually Maghrib, but sunset. There's no prayer allowed in that time. The person may make a prayer. Final thing I will say before I finish the class is that the person who has make-up prayers to do should not make it obvious to people that he is making up a make-up prayer. So by and large, you should try and do that at home. Why is that? The general principle is you should hide your faults. Okay? So the person has made tawbah. He shouldn't come up to the Imam and say, "Oh Imam, I did zina. How do I seek for forgiveness?" He comes to the Imam and says, "I did something wrong. How can Allah forgive me?" Right? So don't tell. We are not Christians, right? We don't tell people our sins, try and hide them. In the same way, someone who has missed many years, he tries to hide that, and he makes the make-up prayers at home where possible. Sometimes that's not always possible. You're at work or other places. A person should go to a corner where he's not obvious to people, and he makes up the prayer there. Jazakumullahu khair.